I stumbled upon this story in a local newspaper from the northeast of England. It took up no more than a column and was relegated to the middle pages, well after any of the significant news stories of the day. But to me it was as intriguing as anything I'd come across. The headline was simply, "Local police sergeant killed by wild animal." But in the UK the most dangerous wild animals could do no more damage than nip at your ankles. So what possible wild creature could kill a trained officer? I needed to know more, and in doing so, I discovered a story as shocking as it was frightening, and led me to question, do monsters actually exist?
Unsaid, back then I was Constable Seb Young, and I was Gordo's, Sergeant Gordon Paynes' partner in Met Police. After getting a transfer from the London Met Police earlier that year, to be closer to my mum, who had randomly and rather inconveniently moved up to that area after she retired. Yeah, I liked Gordo right from the off. A really funny guy. Lots of quirks that even he had to laugh at. Get this. He'd stop whatever we were doing, other than a police chase, to have his mid-morning tea and cookies that he'd have baked the night before with his daughter. Like, I'm talking pull the car over, turn off the radio, and get out this little Tupperware box with his name crayoned on and chow down on them. There could be absolute chaos going on outside. The car, sirens, screams, yet it wouldn't matter as long as he was eating his cookie. Just a funny guy. Anyway, the day it happened, we were sat in the IVR, the police car, just outside one of the small towns, facing the traffic coming into it. Always parked right underneath the welcome to sign, which was no accident. Everything was intentional with Gordo. It was his way of making us part of the welcome for the visitors. Less likely to cause crime if we're the last thing they see before they come into this town. He reckoned it cut crime by about a third in the town. God knows where he got that stat from. And also, what about those coming into the town from the other direction? He was just a funny guy. But as we sat there during, snack time, this very pale, exhausted-looking woman in an old-fashioned, a long dress was walking on the hard shoulder towards us. She had no shoes on. She spotted us, and then it was just as if she was caught in two minds. She went to turn back, but sort of stopped herself and then carried on walking our way. And then the weirdest thing, she just opened the door and climbed into the back of the police car. She was shaking like a leaf in a storm, and it took her ages to kind of, get words out. But when she did, she just blurted, my son needs help. And then she just burst out crying. I asked her where her son was, and as I recall, Gordo and just grabbed my hand to quieten me. And then he turned around to her and asked in this really calm tone, "Have you spoke with the elders?"
Seb was to learn from his partner that the woman was from a small isolated coastal community called EllenGrove, 5 miles from where they were. They were a simple farming group of people with their own religion and their own way of doing things, similar to the Amish community in America. Because of EllenGrove's geography, at the foothills of a largely impassable range of hills, and cut off by the North Sea on the other side, the people of EllenGrove had forged their own culture and traditions over generations, and were fully sustainable, and isolated themselves from the outside world. With poorly maintained roads down into the town and being away from any major thoroughfares, it made all this necessary. When Sergeant Baines asked, "Have you spoke with the elders?" he was referring to the community leaders of EllenGrove. They were in charge of policing the community, an unwritten understanding between the police force and the village. The police rarely got involved in disputes within this community, favouring the elders to do it themselves. And even if they wanted to, they would have been unable to penetrate the wall of silence that was often formed by this fearful and suspicious community.
This was all new to me. I didn't know the Northeast at all. I was raised in the Midlands. But the thought that this little religious town was separate from the rest of us and could police themselves just blew my mind. The woman, a dainty presence who I could tell was battling between trusting us and not trusting us, then told us that her name was Kate and that the elders were the reason her son was in danger. When she said this, I was, as you can imagine, pretty shocked. But looking over at Gordo, he just looked off. Like this was the last thing he needed. And I only understood this reaction later when our two-wheel drive police car bumped and skidded and almost crashed several times on that track down to EllenGrove. I remember at a time thinking we'd need a helicopter to get back out of there.
They decided to drive to EllenGrove and investigate her claim. On what was a surreal journey for Seb, Kate, in the back, explained through restraint that the elders had captured her 13-year-old son. And why did they do this? Because they were going to sacrifice him.
Yeah, that was kind of weird to hear. My first thought was she needed psychiatric help, and maybe you should be driving her to a hospital and not driving her home. But then, overly zealous people can do crazy things in the name of religion, I reasoned. So halfly wondered if what she was saying about her community might be true. I could tell there wasn't a doubt in Gordo's mind now. I mean, he thought she was as mad as a bag of flip-flops. But on that rough track down into the valley, I noticed that the fields, they all look like barren and, well, just in a really bad condition. You could see the old discarded machinery, farming machinery left to rust, in effect, where there had been attempts to harvest their own, but it just looked in a bad state, the whole surrounding land and fields, and particularly for a farming community that solely relied on itself, it just didn't look good. I remember thinking, but when we drove into town, it just got a whole lot weirder. Firstly, we lost all radio contact, personal and CB. Apparently, this was another reason why police seldom went to EllenGrove. And on top of that, on seeing us pull up, everyone in the village just seemed to run inside their gloomy-looking terraced houses and not look back, as if we were the bogey, Ned. I mean, they didn't even shout abuse or throw their cams at us like you get in some other rundown areas.
As they parked up, an elderly gentleman, flanked by two younger and fitter men, and followed by a man in a white doctor's coat, exited a small, run-down brick building that acted as a town hall, and approached the officers. The elderly man was the chief elder of the town, a man who went by the name Jonah. The officers got out of their vehicle, whilst telling Kate to remain in it.
This guy, Jonah, approached us with this wide grin and shook our hands as if we were old friends. Really friendly man, full of the charms of spring. He said he'd hoped we were there to bring his dear sister, Kate, home.
Gordon explained to these men how they had found Kate in a distressed state and how she had talked of her child being kidnapped. Jonah smiled sorrowfully and then explained to both officers that Kate was mentally unwell and had been since the death of her son by drowning several years previous. He continued saying that she often had psychotic episodes, particularly when she refused her medication.
I mean, it wouldn't be the first member of the public we'd come across afflicted like this. And when Jonah assured us that he and the family would take care of her from there, we kind of accepted it. And as I recall, Kate was screaming and kicking the seat in the back of the car at this point. So we were also, I guess, glad to hand her over. I was the one who tried to coax her out of the car myself, but she just pursued quite aggressively, shouting about how her son was taken for sacrifice by the sea. Clearly an adverse emotional reaction to her son's suicide. I thought Jonah and his entourage, I remember them looking on pitifully as if they'd seen this a million times. When they asked if they could take over and make it easier, me and Gordo just stepped aside.
The men grabbed Kate as carefully as they could and held her down whilst the man in the doctor's coat injected her with a sedative, which calmed her instantly. One of the larger, fitter men then carefully picked her up in his arms and took her to what was presumably her house opposite. Jonah thanked the officers heartily and offered them tea before their journey back through the valley. They declined the kind offer and returned to the car.
If I'm being honest, although it was going to be an easy write-up back at the station, and I just felt uneasy leaving her, as did Gordo. He wouldn't trust anyone who was that friendly to a copper. I remember thinking it'd say something like it meant they were hiding something, but it was getting dark and we were worried about going back up that track and out the valley. So, we accepted there wasn't a lot we could do, so we just reversed out of there. But as we did, in the corner of my eye, we see this young lad, probably about 13 years old, running, crying from the back of the hall, and he was running towards the house which Kate had just been taken to. He was screaming for his mom and crying, bawling his eyes out. And then Jonah and maybe they hadn't seen us, Jonah and his henchmen, because we were about probably 50 metres up the road by this point. Who knows, but they ran out after the young lad and just dragged him back into the hall. It was Kate's son, no doubt. Me and Gordo looked at each other, and then he just put the car into drive and raced back towards them.
Gordon jumped out the vehicle and towards the hall, his kosh now in hand, whilst instructing Seb to fiddle with the radio to try and resurrect life from the static. They needed backup, and they needed it fast. Seb had been doing this some time, hearing the control centre cut in and out, desperate to get some response, when he heard a gunshot. As the UK police don't carry firearms, there was only one person who was on the receiving end of that.
I'm scared now, and it only gets scarier. This haunting air raid alarm starts up and blasts its sickly tone across the village. I'm out of the car now, stood in the middle of the road, not sure which end is my ass, thinking, if I walk into that town hall to say Gordo, I'm going to be flying out of it with a hole in my chest.
But it only gets worse for Seb. The siren has charmed the town's men from their homes, armed with shovels, hammers, and even pitchforks. They nod towards one another and then charge towards Seb. He runs back to the car, but realising Gordon has the keys, he has to run down an alleyway between two of the terraced houses to escape the mob, who are now in a frenzy, charged by the hunt.
I run down one alleyway, and then another, and another. No, they're all connected. There's just a maze of them, and I'm trapped. The yells are now deafening, echoing down the alleyways. So I just jump into one of the many bins, like in a cartoon, and hide in there until I can hear them pass. And it was just bizarre, terrifying, but bizarre. And I've never experienced anything like it before or since.
When he thought it was safe to do so, Seb climbed out the bin and ran back in the direction he'd come, when a back gate into the alley opened and a middle-aged, malnourished woman stood and stared at him. But instead of screaming and alerting the mob, she signalled for Seb to be quiet and guided him into the house, locking the door behind them.
This house is dark, but for a few candles that she starts lighting, and it's plain and empty in there, no artwork, no photos of family or no TV, just a drab house. And what furniture there is, it's just drab. I ask her what the hell is going on, and she just shushes me and tells me to shut up and signals for me to go upstairs. So I follow her into a small dark bedroom and towards the window which looks out onto the street and the town hall. And I could just see the baying mob that are just taking their frustrations out from not finding me, and they're now trashing the car. So like I remember Colin just shouting at this woman and bemoaning her telephone, which she tells me there isn't one, that they're banning me in the village along with electricity. And it's around then that I looked out the window and I see Jonah and his heavies dragging out a bleeding Gordo from the town hall, and they just drag him towards the beach. And that's when she tells me they're off to sacrifice him. I mean, at that time I'm thinking, oh God, here we go. I've got another crackpot on my hands, and I thought this one seemed pretty normal.
A lesser known folklore from around this region, dating back hundreds of years, is of an amphibious creature, about 12 to 15 foot in height, called an Aquinian, that lives in the North Sea by day, but walks the coastline and its villages by night. The haunting story goes that the creature expects a substantial food offering every night from the villagers, and if unsatisfied, it kills and takes the livestock, destroys the crops, and poisons the earth. The EllenGrove people, it seemed, lived in fear of the folklore, and after failing with its measly offerings, were hoping to appease the creature that evening with an offering of Kate's 13-year-old son, Elliot. However, with Gordon now captured, they could now offer a more substantial one.
I mean, my head is spinning. It's quite clear that not only does this woman believe this insanity, but the people in power do. And not only do they believe in it, they're about to kill a police officer for it. Like, I just remember shouting at her, telling her that she's been brainwashed and she needs to help me get out there and talk to them and save a police sergeant. But she's not having any of it. She's just telling me over and over that it's hard for an outsider such as me to understand, but it's all true, that they're going to offer Gordo to this creature in order for their crops and last remaining livestock to be saved. I mean, it was madness.
As night falls, Seb remains hiding with her in the house as he desperately tries to figure out what his next move is. From the woman's window, the beach is just about visible, and in the darkness he can make out the figure of his limp partner being dragged across it to where a long wooden post is buried in the sand. He watches in disbelief. The mob of townsmen, now carrying torches to fend off the darkness, congregate outside the hall, still enraged by Seb's disappearance. They want Seb found, and to Seb's horror, they spread out and begin banging on front doors and barging their way into homes in search of him.
On the rabbit caught in a snare, I can see and hear them going from house to house looking for me, and they're angry. And then this woman who's helped me up until now, she just starts panicking, realises it doesn't look good for her that I'm in her home. So I'm there trying to calm her down, whilst also thinking, where the hell can I hide? But, I mean, I can't even hide under the bed. It's one of those box beds with no room underneath it. And there's not much else in the way of furniture, so it's not as if I can just jump in a cupboard. But, I mean, it doesn't matter any, like, she just does me over. She opens the window and just screams at the top of her lungs that she's caught me hiding in a house. I'm basically about to be lynched, and I'm scared. The front door bangs again, and then it just caves in, followed by what sounds like 1,000 pairs of feet racing up the stairs. And then I'm just faced with this mob, quite literally holding pitchforks and shovels, like in the movies.
But then something strange happened. The air raid siren goes off again, for longer this time, and the mob that were about to lynch Seb suddenly withdraw and exit the house in haste. They then quickly disperse to their own homes, force window shutters down, bolt doors and extinguish any lights. It's an attempt to make their homes as inconspicuous to the creature as possible, in the hope it will just walk on by.
I mean, I can't believe my luck. Oh, I thought I was a goner for sure. I'm thinking, because of their insane fear of what may lurk in the dark, they've abandoned the town to lock themselves away. So, I'm free to get out there and save Gordo. The woman, of course, warns me against going out there, says I'll be eaten by this Aquinium if I do. I mean, I just smile, thank her for her warm hospitality, of course, and tell her I'll take my chances with the wicked sea monster.
But the town is eerie, filled with an angry sea of dangerous men only minutes before. It's now as if a giant plug has been pulled, draining the streets of all its energy. No sound, no light, other than a confident moon beaming down. Seb races towards the beach. Gordon is slumped against the post, but he's bleeding profusely from his side, where a bullet has entered. He's drifting in and out of consciousness.
I'm hiding in the shadows. I'm still wary, not sure if this is a trap, and I'm easing my way over to him, steadily, shouting at him just to hold on. But I can see his wrists are chained behind him, around the post. I'm not going to be able to lift him without breaking the chains, but I figure there'll be something in the boot of the car that I can use to cut him free. And, well, I figure, the weirdos have clocked off on the nights over. I should be left alone. But, it was about to get a whole lot worse. I heard it coming out of the water before I actually saw it. But see it, I did. The creature was, as it was explained to me, the shape of a man, but 12, 14 foot in height, covered in these dark scales and fish eyes. I mean, nothing can prepare you for seeing that. Nothing. And I know it's mad. As I'm saying it out loud, I'm aware how mad it sounds, but I saw it. It was only a few meters away, and I saw her.
The creature picked Gordon up and slid him over the post, like meat on a skewer, and then ate him, semi-alive. He still had the strength to scream. Seb managed to get back to the car, which had been trashed and would be undrivable even if he'd had the keys. But in it he saw the upturned Tupperware box with Gordon's name written on it in his daughter's handwriting. Seb broke down crying. It was then that Kate, who had come out of her sedation, along with her son Elliot, approached him in the dark street.
And she hugged me. It was a hub of thanks for saving her son, as well as I hope for what I'd just seen. And I remember needing that hug. And without saying a word, she took my hand and we just ran. We ran out of that valley under that strong moonlight, and we just ran until we couldn't run anymore. And then we finally reached civilization. Just, we saw people just before dawn, as I recall. Yeah, despite my report saying exactly what I'd witnessed and documenting the people who were involved in what I saw and what I experienced, as well as, having numerous interviews with senior police staff, Gordo's death went down as an accident. A tragic accident, death from an animal litter. Can you believe that? Makes it sound like he was attacked by a dog. And then they closed the case without any further investigation. And the worst thing, they made me out to be the mad one. said I'd been through a traumatic episode and losing my partner, and so I formed these distorted memories. But I know what I saw, and I sure as hell know there ain't no wild animals in this land that can do what Gordo had done to him. You know, I don't mind saying that I left the force years ago, but the powers that be know the truth about EllenGrove and the presence of this Aquinium, this creature. But they'll do what it takes to keep it secret. Yeah, they will. Even if that means robbing a good copper's family of the truth.